For our warm-up today, we are going to be doing some decimal dictation. So I will read a decimal to you. I would like for you to write the decimal. So here we go. The decimal for the first one is 3 and 1/10. 3 and 1/10. Pause your video, write that down. So here's what that should look like if you did it correctly. Let's do another one. So our second one is going to be 6 and 71/100ths. 6 and 71/100ths. Pause your video. Check it out. How'd you do? 6 and 71/100ths would be written just like that. Number 3. 73 and 65/100ths. 73 and 65/100ths. Pause your video. Check it out. How'd you do? All right, number 4. 40 and 278/1000ths. I'll say that one more time. 40 and 278/1000ths. Pause your video. Check it out. Did you get it right? Awesome. For your math message today, you are going to need to get into your workbook, your student math journal, and turn to page 114, and you're going to complete problems 1 through 3. It should look just like this when you get it open. So go ahead and pause your video and see if you can complete those 3 problems. So for problem 1, I wrote the number 43 and wrote out the word hundredths. This is one way that you could write that in words, and let me show you another. And this would be the second way that you could write that out. So we basically would just take the number and write it out in words along with the hundredths that we had before. Okay, if we move to number 2, you were supposed to write 0 and 43/100ths in the place value chart below. And you should have 0 ones because we did not have a whole number. We've got 4 in the tenths place, 4 in the tenths place here, and 3 in the hundredths place, 3 in the hundredths place up here. So we're good there. So let's take a look at number 3. So here is what number 3 would look like. We've got 10, 20, 30, 40, 41, 42, 43 hundredths. This lesson is representing decimals through thousandths. So today we will represent or show decimals to the thousandths. So if you take a look at my grid here, it looks a lot different than what we have used in the past. You will notice that the dark lines that you see here actually look like the base 10 blocks that we've used in the past. However, notice that we now have very small little rectangles inside of each of those squares. So this flat right here is going to represent one whole, just like it does with our base 10 blocks. However, since we are talking about decimals, we have divided them into smaller sections. So if we look here to the right, this rectangle right here would represent 1/10. And that is because there would be 10 of those in this large square. Then we move over here to this square that has been divided up into very tiny rectangles. and that would be this square here. One of those is worth 1/100th. And of course, it would take 100 of those squares to fill this entire hole. And then if we break it down even farther into the teeny tiny little rectangle that we have here shaded, this is 1/1000th, because it would take 1,000 of those tiny little squares shaded in to fill this entire hole. So let's take a look here and kind of summarize that. A column is 1/10 of the whole grid, just like a tenth is 1/10 of 1. A small square is 1/10 of a column, just like a hundredth is 1/10 of a tenth. Starting to get a little confusing, isn't it? A tiny rectangle is 1/10 of a small square, just like a thousandth is 1/10 of a hundredth. So the most important thing for you to think about is how this relates to base 10 blocks and how they have divided this up into smaller sections to demonstrate the decimal. So how would we shade 0 and 432 thousandths? So if you take a look at the grid here on the left, we're going to look at our first digit after the decimal point. We know that we have a 4 in the tenths place, so that means that we would shade 4 of those in. So all of this would be 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll shade all of that in. And now we're going to move to the next place over, which is a 3 in the hundredths place. Now remember, the hundredths are going to be these squares. So we would need 4 of those shaded in. And then we'll move to the last digit here, which is a 2. And this is probably what's going to be hardest to shade because those are the smallest rectangles. But we need to shade in 2 of those. So I'm not sure if I can get it shaded. There's 1 and 2. So that is what that would look like for 0 and 432 thousandths. So let's take a look at the next one. We have 0 and 285 thousandths this time. So again, we're going to walk through each digit. So we have a 2 in the tenths place. So that means we're going to shade 2 columns. And then we're going to move over to the next digit, which is our 8. And that means that we're going to shade 8 of these squares. And then we're going to move over to our last digit, which is the 5. And we are going to try very hard to shade 5 of those tiny little rectangles. And that is what that would look like there. Okay, so now we have 0 and 67 thousandths. So notice we've got a 0 in our tenths place. We've got a 6 in our hundredths place. So let's think about that for a minute. That means I'm going to shade 6 of these. And then I'm going to move to that 7, and I'm going to shade 7 of those tiny let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 5 going across there, and then 2 more. That would be 7. Looks a lot different than regular decimals, right, with the base 10 blocks. Okay, so we'll go ahead and take a look now at the next one, which is 0 and 504 thousandths. Our first digit is a 5 in the tenths place. So we're going to do 5 of these. And of course, you're going to do a much better job shading than I am right now. For time purposes, I'm trying to hurry along a little bit here. All right, and then we move to the next column. We have a 0 in the hundredths place. So we're going to scoot on over to the 4, which is in the thousandths place. And now we're just going to shade 4 tiny little rectangles there. And there you have it. A couple more examples here. The first one is 0 and 250 thousandths. So again, we're going to look at that first digit, which is a 2 in the tenths place. That means we're going to shade 2 of these long rectangles. And then we're going to move over to the hundredths, which there are 5. So we'll shade 5 of those. And then we don't have anything in the thousandths place, so we are done with that one. As we move to this example here, we have 0 and 300 thousandths. So again, we have a 3 in the tenths place. So we'll shade 3 of those. And we're going to pretend that that's nice and pretty. And we have 0 and 300 thousandths. We're done. We don't have anything in those last 2 places. So there's nothing else to shade in. So let's summarize what we've done here. We learned that decimals can be represented using grids that are broken down into tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. We also learned that we can name or represent decimals using fractions, words, and grids. So we've kind of done that in the past couple of lessons. And if we take our time and represent each digit's value, we can show what a decimal looks like in grid form. There you have it. Nice job, guys. Until next time.